Talisman Skulls, Mark Warlock, founder of Sidutru. This is part 9, the 8-pole calendar, what it really is associated with, not what a lot of people think it is. Long story short, it's specifically not holidays, but observances based specifically on the migration and life cycles of caribou, otherwise called reindeer. And it basically works out like this, which also ties into the actual threefold holidays that overlap. Quick and easy, it goes like this. Pinewood forests, that's where everybody's shelter is during winter. Over into February, that's when the females are starting, or the reindeer are starting to get their milk, and they're starting to migrate their way through the ice and shit on their way down to the birthing grounds that the animals have been doing for thousands upon thousands of years, and the people following them being semi-nomadic. And anyway, so that season is referred to as in the belly to represent the pregnant cow reindeer, and also Olmec, meaning new milk. So that's pretty easy to figure out. Then we got, and that would be called the spring, the pre-spring. Then we got the spring equinox, and that's when the reindeer have all, or caribou have all made it to the birthing grounds and start giving birth to their young bucks and whatnot. Young bucks and doe. And then we move over into the April, May Day type celebrations again. And this is when the young are all hyper happy, bouncing around, playing, socializing, getting socialized, and being watched over by, the main animals and the people, especially from predators that are going to be in there and hungry for some yummy new snacks. It's also when a lot of other animals come out in full board, and it's literally life is just everywhere. And it's all the time the rest of the snows have pretty much gone away, and it's grazing time, and the animals start fattening up on that, and the young ones are playing, and there you go. Then that moves us over into June, and that's when the young animals are starting to basically butt heads with each other and establish their pecking order within the herd's communities. And, of course, the people are not doing anything but letting the animals be the animals while they watch over their herds. And it's also the time that some of them will get their ears clipped, to know which clan or tribe of the herds people these ones belong to, which group that's basically synchronized with these life cycles and lifestyles. Then we start moving over into the August season, when the weaker animals are selected for slaughter and marked for that, more or less. And people are gathering up the various natural supplies, food resources, everything, and already starting the preparations for preservation, making repairs to their tents, their tools, their equipment, whatnot, and just kind of getting shit going. But it's also just before the major rut begins with a lot of them. Which then brings us up into September, and that's when males are butting heads for breeding rights. And females are more or less waiting for the more worthy of them to get it on with. And that's when a lot of the nomadic people that live with them go off and do other things and stay the fuck out of their way. And you don't want to get cut in the middle of that one. Go off things like fishing and whatnot, and hunting other animals and things like that for food reserves and whatnot, while the rest of the final touches on the mobile camps are being handled by those that stay home, whether it's the young, elderly, or the women folk. It doesn't matter, it's fine. It's not even discriminatory, it's just culturally based. It's something you don't need to impose yourself on. Get over it. That's literally a culture that's closer to the earth than you are. And then we bring up to October, which is when the weakest animals are selected for slaughter but have already been fattened up and everything else. And also helps to reduce the burden on the other animals as well as those who take care of them. And all the remaining meat and bone and hides and everything else are cleaned up, prepared, stored, dried, preserved to carry the people through the rest of the season. And they basically live off whatever other game is available as it becomes more scarce during the dark season. Then that's when all the clans following the herds that have started making their way back to the old shelter, the old pinewood forests and mountainous regions out of the open plains area, which is basically a death sentence if you stay out there, no matter how hardy a person you are. Go into these places for the shelter to basically camp out through the darkest season of the year, where it's 24 hours and nighttime for a couple of months at least. And you get all the joyful colors of looking at the aurora borealis and all that other movie stuff. But the custom then too was like, as more of the different clans would come together with the different herds and everything else, people were sharing and giving gifts to re-strengthen their bonds with these other clans, and still do. And that's where a lot of the customs of giving gifts on the Yuletide holidays is part of that, as well as celebrating the fact that the cold won't be lasting forever, and there's a promise of new life and new spring in the near future, because that is the cycle of things, that is the cycle of life. And so there were a lot of festivities, but that was also a time too where the different clans would start trading goods and sharing information, telling each other stories about their adventures and whatnot. And that's the real big get together. That is the super party of the year for these folk. And it's also time to meet up with potential spouse. For those that, meet with different clans. Last thing you want to do is fuck with somebody directly in your own clan, or it might be your relative directly, as in brother or sister. Yeah. You really don't want to go there. So anyway, so yeah, that was a lot of time, and that was their version of the Allthingy, which means all things, as in all things of celebration, all things of community, all things of clan leaders discussing concerns and needs of the people, handling any dispute resolutions within their custom and traditional laws, and sorting their own shit out, basically, but also dealing with outside forces that affect or have been affecting their culture and community rather irreverently. And that's really how that original calendar was formulated. But even in this, the original Halloween still falls within August, as if you want to call it Samhain, whatever, go for it. But just remember that your so-called party hardy Halloween was not October. It is actually, in fact, August. And only idiots want to ignore that. Otherwise, they're just following a knockoff from Catholic concepts and completely out of context with the actual cultural foundation or the symbolism that was basically invented to try and make people look like they were a bunch of superstitious buffoons. And they're not. And anybody who actually looks at native cultures will actually see they're very practical, and while they have their spirituality, they're not, worried that everything's jumping out of the shadows at them and it's going to try to come and eat their face, but they don't deny the fact that there are nasty beings that the wrong person's happening to the wrong thing can get the wrong attention from and really fuck somebody's world up. So Not hell in the usual run-of-the-mill concept, but definitely not a happy situation for anybody that messes with or intentionally goes and seeks to mess with dark forces. But the concept of heaven or hell is not the same, but it's not absent from these cultures, and it's not from Christian influences. It predates them. So hell is more or less for the legitimately nasty people, and not people who just simply made mistakes in life. You know, the whole deal is different. You do well to research that. So there you go. These were observances, things that people do during the life cycle, synchronized with the animals that the livelihood's all based in. Not holidays. There were 3 holidays, 8 migration cycles. The more stable farm-type communities, those are the ones that had the main established ninefold, the 19-year metonic cycle of the moon, broken down into 5 sets of 19 years, for a total of 95 years, which then drew out the pentagram of the moon, hence the 5-pointed star and the crescent, which predates Islam by a very long time. Other cultures were using that long before Islamic whatever took it over. But that's why the crescent is part of the 5-pointed stars, because of that 95-year total cycle broken down into 5 sets of 19, and each year marked off by 13 months, which also breaks down into 4 sets of 13 weeks each, for a total of 52 weeks for that lunar year, and so on and so forth. Go ahead and do the calculation sometime. It's pretty nifty. You'll find it yourself. But after 95 years, that's when the moon is seen to go right back to the same starting point associated with the winter solstice. Said, all 3 calendars. That's why all those calendars, like the Galactic Circle, Stonehenge, and everything else, has 3 rings. It's also why Stonehenge has a horseshoe shape in the center, because it represents the world steed. Those 5 main large trilithons were associated with that, with those 5 sets of 19-year markers. And that's one of the reasons people started getting more aware of how the calendars worked out, started adding it to the Stonehenge structure. And they didn't necessarily have a roof on there. If they did, it's not impossible, but it's not actually true. And I saw one where a guy claims that it had a wooden roof, and then he puts in a concept of a big glass diamond, trying to make it look like some kind of Egyptian Atlantis temple thing, and actually has a video in there where the light must strike it, and so this rainbow light must go over. And I was thinking, I had to laugh, because I was thinking to myself, I really don't think people in the Neolithic were hanging around in a wood hut covered Stonehenge waiting for their version of a disco party. And that's pretty much what it's being painted out to be. And it's yeah. Is it possible someone added a roof to it later at some point in time? It was torn back down? Yes, it's possible. We already know that a lot of stuff was burnt down. There's only one problem with that hypothesis. Absolutely no fucking evidence that there was actually anything there, and somebody's misinterpretations when bluestones were brought in further from the circle rather than the outer posts. And those were later used as crematorium burials for people from the different clan leaders of men and women alike, to be connected with their ancestral link, and was probably served as like a marker for the tribal confederation, more or less, especially in the wintertime. So, like I said, all we can take is the actual folklore, the archaeology, and the etymology, tie them together, and voila, we don't need the fucking Eddas. We don't need the occult. We don't need spaceships from the planet My Crouton Cracanus, of androgynous bald guys raping one-legged lesbian kickboxing big feet. Anyway, Talisman Skulls here. Moving on to the next video.